But I guess I'll ask you, Jordan. Jordan, do you think that the Jaguars' offensive line right now is good enough to win games?
Yeah, without question. When healthy last year, it was good enough to win games. And when you look at this offensive line on paper going into 2024 compared to what it was in 2023 entering the season, you had Luke Fortner, who I think a lot of people were expecting to take a step forward last year. Instead of taking a step forward, he regressed. So that was a major disappointment. I don't think anybody was, saying they needed to replace Luke Fortner prior to the season starting as a guy going into his second year, but it didn't work out. You have Mitch Morse, who, even if Luke Fortner had taken a step forward last year, Mitch Morse is several tiers above him in terms of starting centers in the NFL, bottom line, bar none. And then you have Ezra Cleveland at left guard versus you were entering last season with Ben Barch as your starter. And Ben Barch did not last very long. He was coming back from the knee injury. Jaguars moved on from him. He went to San Francisco. I think he's still there, but he's not projected to be a starter. So you now have Mitch Morse, who is a longtime veteran, great athlete, great leader, somebody who I think is not only going to be an upgrade over Luke Fortner, but make the jobs of Brandon Sheriff and Ezra Cleveland much easier than they had it last year when Luke Fortner was playing center. And then you have Ezra Cleveland, who's certainly an upgrade over Ben Barch. When he arrived in Jacksonville, he was thrust into a new situation mid-season. He sustained an injury immediately, and so he was trying to play through injury throughout the back half of last year. And so I don't think you saw the Ezra Cleveland that had started every single game for the Vikings throughout his career during the back half of last season. So yes, I think the offensive line is certainly better. Cam Robinson or Walker Little, whoever's starting at left tackle, I think it'll be Cam Robinson to start the year. You're in a good situation there in pass protection. Anton Harrison, you're in a very good situation with that young man in pass protection. And then Brandon Sheriff is still one of the best pass protecting guards in football. Notice I did not mention run blocking there. I don't think that you need to have an elite run blocking team for Trevor Lawrence and Doug Peterson and this offense to succeed. Would it help? Certainly. I think that it can be better with better health than it was last year. I know that when you talk about what they tried to do last year on the ground, it was a lot of throwing crap at the wall and seeing what sticks, and none of it stuck. They're going to be more focused. They're going to try to find their bread and butter. They're going to try to find what works and be more dialed in on specific run concepts this year than they were last year. I know they're working on getting hands in the dirt a little bit more than they did last year. So it's going to be interesting to see if Phil Rauscher, the offensive line coach, and this running game can kind of get things going. But I certainly think they have what it takes to protect Trevor Lawrence up front.
So I'm curious with you, Jason, because I know you have, I guess your biggest gripe about this offseason is kind of what the Jaguars did with the offensive line. Is your issue with the offensive line more so like a on a starting level when it comes to you don't think that the starters are good enough, or do you worry about some of the injury history that maybe guys like Cam Robinson and Brandon Sheriff have, or are you most worried about the depth? Kind of give us your thoughts on the offensive line in that perspective.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to just disagree with Jordan here. I think that when you look at the end of the season rankings for offensive line over the last 3 years, we've been near the bottom of the list. So I think it's easy for us to cherry pick. Oh, we were really good in this one Houston game. Oh, we were really good in this Colts game. And so because of these good games and these good moments, these guys have what it takes to play that way all the time throughout the whole season. But what we've seen is that they cannot play that way throughout the whole year, throughout the whole season. All those guys you mentioned, minus Anton Harrison, have given us things to worry about. Now, we don't know about Mitch Morse, but like there's moments where Cam Robinson doesn't look good and Walker Little doesn't look good. Brandon Sheriff doesn't look good. Ezra Cleveland doesn't look good. And on top of that, all four of those guys have an extensive injury history. So I think in a perfect world, if we were playing Madden, turned injuries off, and they were just going off of their stats, they'd probably be okay. But we have a body of work to look at. And we can see that for the last 3 years, and a lot of these guys have been here, and we've seen what they can do. We end the season always saying we need to upgrade the offensive line. And our biggest asset is Trevor Lawrence. So I don't understand. My biggest gripe, like you said, is why we didn't go get more depth at the offensive line position Now, I think Javon Foster could be okay, and he's a late round guy, and I actually kind of like him, but I was really looking for more quality on the offensive line. And as you said, in depth, in the starters. I mean, the Vikings traded Cleveland because they had a guy that was better. It wasn't like we gave them this great deal to take a great offensive lineman. Like, he got beat out by another guy there. And so I really think that I would just hate to end this year and be like, oh, offensive line let us down again. And it's like, we've been saying that for years. So at what point do we stop cherry picking these good moments that they have and call a spade a spade? And these guys have not performed well when it's mattered the most. And yes, you don't need Jordan called it an effective run game, but you have to have some run game. We looked at the everyone's given Press Taylor so much crap for his play calling. The dude couldn't run the ball and gain 1 yard. How do you call a game where you can't gain 1 yard on the ground? Like, it's impossible. You got to throw out swing passes and tosses and tunnel screens and bubble screens. And that's the only way you get to do, a horizontal running game. And it just leads to unproductiveness on the offense. It led to Trevor Lawrence getting hurt because as great as the line was at moments, at the end of the day, they gave up big hit after big hit after big hit on him. And I would have rather sacrificed receiver. I would have rather sacrificed the running back that we drafted to go get an offensive line that we can say, okay, if we are seeing this repeated performance that's subpar, we can put someone else in. If we are seeing an injury, we can put someone else in. I just don't want to sit here at the end of this year's season and say, well, offensive line let us down again, when the only improvement we made was a center who I understand helps the interior all around. But we ended this season saying this offensive line was not good enough. And it wasn't even like they were almost good enough. They weren't even close to good enough. And the only addition we made was Mitch Morse. And we're just banking on everyone just staying healthy. So I have a lot of problems with the offensive line. And I hope to be proved wrong. I want everything that Jordan said to be correct. Like, I want that. I want to look back and say I was wrong. But, my inside feeling, we're going to be having the same conversation at the end of the season.
So I would argue that when you talk about cherry picking, when you talk about the last 2 seasons and the pass protection in Jacksonville, I'm not arguing it has been elite. I would say the cherry picking is looking at what happened when players were not healthy and saying that the offensive line wasn't good enough. You can't predict injury. You can't. Now, you can say Cam Robinson has mistimed with injury throughout his career. Guess what? The third string tackle is Walker Little. That's a good pass protector at left tackle. He played well when healthy last year. Cam Robinson played well when healthy last year. Mitch Morse is a big upgrade. I still think Ezra Cleveland is an upgrade, another player who tried to play through injury last year. So I think when you talk about the pass protection over the last 2 years, just like when you talk about Trevor Lawrence the last 2 years, when they've been healthy, when he's been healthy, it's looked pretty darn good. And the offense has worked a lot more often than not to a great effect, especially in the passing game.
Yeah, so I'm probably right in the middle of you two. I know for me, like when you look at what the Jaguars have done on the offensive line, okay, so the one star that you see is different is that they're upgrading, they're getting rid of Luke Fortner, basically making him a backup and hopefully a third stringer and replacing him with a Mitch Morse. I mean, that the Jaguars did that before free agency even started, okay? That was something that the Jaguars absolutely needed to do. And then, they're definitely banking on the fact that they blame 2023's problems on the center position, and they're blaming it kind of on the injuries that happened. And if you do go back to 2022, like I'm not sitting here wanting the Jaguars offensive line to be like a top 5 unit in the NFL. But if they're just right in the middle, it's good enough to win games, okay? It's good enough to say, okay, just hold on to, your blocker long enough for Trevor Lawrence to make throws. And of course, once the throwing gets going, then you're going to be able to run the ball well. I mean, last year, the Jaguars couldn't run the ball at all. And I think one thing that really speaks volumes is that when the Jaguars played the Carolina Panthers, okay, you had both, I believe it was both Ezra Cleveland and Walker Little just healthy, the scratches that game, okay? Like, both of them could have played, but they decided not to play them just because they thought that they were so much better than the Carolina Panthers. So, when the Jaguars did that, I think that it kind of showed that these guys are really nicked up. And I think that was a big issue with the Jaguars last year is that, like, we weren't losing players like for the entire season last year, but we were losing players to the point where like they were just getting a little bit nicked up and they weren't themselves anymore. I mean, I'm a guy who I believe Tyson Campbell is a really good player, but after the injury, he was all of a sudden terrible, and then you saw the same thing kind of with like an Andre Cisco. Okay. Like Andre Cisco was playing great at safety. All of a sudden he gets hurt and he comes back from his soft tissue injury and he's not the same player anymore. And you kind of saw that all around the Jaguars, especially on the offensive line. It was unfortunate that we only got to see, I think it was even less than a half when it comes to Cam Robinson playing at left tackle and Walker Little playing at left guard, because I thought Walker Little, when healthy, was honestly better than Cam Robinson at left tackle. And, Brandon Sheriff was always getting hurt. And, the one guy that was able to stay healthy the whole entire year was a Luke Fortner. And even Anton Harrison wasn't healthy the whole year. I mean, he had injury. He had a surgery right at the season to repair something that happened to him in a preseason. So
he played the whole year with a shoulder injury as a rookie. Yeah. Going up against guys like TJ Watt and company throughout the entire season. That was incredible.
Yeah, that was incredible. And that's a really good get. And I'm really glad that, and I'm excited to see his future on the Jaguars. Like when you project out to, a 2025, when, as it stands right now, Cam Robinson and Walker Little will be free agents. Does Anton Harrison eventually move to left tackle, or do they want him to stay at right tackle? It'll be interesting to see. But, where the Jaguars offensive line stands right now, I'm hoping that the offensive line is just good enough. I'm not projecting them to be top 10, but I'm just hoping that we can stay healthy, because it feels like you have pretty good depth at the tackle positions, but right now on the interior offensive line, it's not really looking the same there. So, overall, I'm just, anytime you get dealt with injuries, you're kind of, especially when it comes to your quarterback, that was kind of turned into the microcosm of last season where, everybody just got hurt, including your quarterback, and it just flat out wasn't good. So,
yeah. Another thing with injuries is like, yeah, we can say this guy was banged up, this guy's banged up, but everyone in the league's banged up. I mean, how many guys did the Bills lose when we played them to injury? I mean, everyone. I mean, Anton played with a shoulder injury, but the D end that's going against him has got a knee injury, right? It's like that's the game, and it's like we have to get used to guys playing through injuries, and it does make it exceptional. It doesn't take anything away from it, but this injury, like we were just injured this year. Yeah, you can have those years where you make runs where everyone stays freaky healthy, but that's not the reality, and that doesn't ever really happen. So have to have depth. You have to be able to have guys that can play. I'm not
what
as big
happened
on
to the Bills
Walker
at the end of the year.
Yeah, and it's going to happen. And
what happened to the Browns in the wild card round of the playoffs? Another injured team.
Yeah,
got smoked by the Houston Texans. So
and
I didn't see any teams that were there at the end of the year that were nearly as injured as any of the teams we just mentioned. So you do have to have some luck.
And we're also not talking about like one or two players on the offensive line. Like literally 80% of the offensive line had some kind of injury. And one of those guys, the one guy that stayed healthy, was by far the worst player on our roster. We're starting a roster when it comes to a Luke Fortner. So I don't know.
Worst starter for sure last year.
Yeah, by far the worst starter. And the thing that trolls me about Luke Fortner is I know people still like talk about, maybe there's something to salvage there. That's the thing that gets me, is the fact that like the thing that hurt him in 2022 was that, he needs to get stronger. Okay. He was getting pushed around a little bit. And, I feel like if there's anything you can control, is probably going to be your strength. Because I know for me, when I played, in college lacrosse my freshman year, I was just getting straight up pushed around. I said, okay, like I'm going to make sure my second year of lacrosse, if I'm not doing well, it's not because I'm not strong enough. You know what I mean? And the fact that Luke Fortner, with all the different things at his disposal, he still came in and he almost looked weaker than he did the prior year. I just don't know if I will ever believe in the fact that he could ever turn things around.
Yeah, and you're talking about a 25-year-old second-year player.
Yeah.
Yep.
Now he's 26 going into year 3.
Yeah.
It's not looking good.